Imagine waking up one day and realizing that nothing truly matters. That life, death, love, and morality are just illusions created by society to give meaning to an indifferent universe. This is the world of Meursault, the protagonist of The Stranger. Albert Camus' groundbreaking novel that explores absurdism, existentialism, and the consequences of living without conventional emotions or morality. Published in 1942, this book challenges everything we assume about life, justice, and what it means to be human. At the heart of the novel is a man who refuses to play by society's rules. Meursault does not grieve at his mother's funeral, does not pretend to love when others expect him to, and kills a man for no logical reason. And for that, society condemns him, not just for his crime, but for his refusal to pretend that life has meaning. But is Meursault truly indifferent? Or does he simply see the world more clearly than those around him? Let's dive into The Stranger and uncover the story of a man who defies everything we believe about existence. Chapter 1. The Death of a Mother. Maman died today. Or maybe yesterday. I don't know. These are the first words of The Stranger, setting the tone for everything that follows. Meursault, a young Algerian man, receives a telegram informing him that his mother has passed away in a nursing home. But his reaction is shockingly cold. He does not cry. He does not feel sadness. He does not even remember the exact day she died. Instead, he takes a bus to the home where she lived, more preoccupied with the heat of the sun than the weight of his loss. As he arrives, the caretaker offers to let him see the body. Meursault refuses. What's the point? She's already dead. At the wake, he sits beside the coffin, drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. The other mourners, especially his mother's close friend, an old man named Perez, weep openly. They are appalled by Meursault's indifference. He simply watches them, detached, as if observing a ritual he does not belong to. The next day, under the scorching sun, Meursault follows the funeral procession to the cemetery. He barely listens to the priest's words. He is too focused on the unbearable heat, the brightness of the sun, and his own physical discomfort. As sweat drips down his face, he wonders, why does it even matter? After the funeral, he returns home, exhausted. But rather than reflecting on his mother's death, he falls into a deep, dreamless sleep. By the next morning, her passing is already fading from his mind. For Meursault, life simply moves on. And it is this indifference, this refusal to grieve, to conform, to pretend, that will set him apart from society and ultimately seal his fate. Chapter 2. The Pursuit of Pleasure. The day after his mother's funeral, Meursault wakes up feeling refreshed, with no lingering grief. Instead of mourning, he goes to the beach. There, he runs into Marie, a former co-worker. She's beautiful, lively, and full of energy. They swim together, laughing as they splash in the waves. Later that evening, they watch a movie, a light-hearted comedy. That night, Marie asks Meursault if he loves her. He simply shrugs. It doesn't matter, he replies. He enjoys spending time with her. He likes her body, but love? It's meaningless to him. Marie doesn't seem to mind. She stays the night, and they fall asleep together. As the days pass, Meursault settles into his routine. He goes to work, spends time with Marie, eats at the same cafe, and watches people go by. Life, to him, is simple. He does what feels good, avoiding unnecessary emotions or attachments. Raymond, a dangerous friendship. Meursault soon meets Raymond Sintès, a shady neighbor with a violent streak. Raymond confides in Meursault, telling him about his mistress, a woman he suspects of cheating on him. He wants revenge. Raymond devises a plan to lure her back and then publicly humiliate her. He asks Meursault for advice, and Meursault, indifferent as always, tells him it doesn't matter. Raymond is pleased. He considers Meursault a true friend, someone who understands him. As proof of their bond, he invites Meursault to his beach house for a weekend trip. Meursault, without hesitation or concern, accepts. He does not see the danger in aligning himself with a man like Raymond. He does not see the consequences forming around him. Chapter 3. A Life Without Meaning. Meursault's life continues in the same detached, routine manner. Days pass without much thought. He wakes up, goes to work, eats, and spends time with Marie. He enjoys her company but still feels no deeper attachment. A job opportunity and indifference. One day, his boss calls him into the office and offers him a promotion with a transfer to Paris. It's a great opportunity. Better pay, a chance to see a new city. Most people would be excited, but Meursault simply doesn't care. He tells his boss it doesn't matter to him one way or another. If they need him to go, he'll go. If not, he'll stay. It makes no difference. His boss is confused by his lack of ambition, but lets the matter drop. Marie, however, is thrilled at the prospect of moving to Paris. She asks Meursault again if he loves her, if he would marry her. His response is as cold as before. It doesn't matter, but if you want, we can get married. Marie, though somewhat saddened by his indifference, agrees. She convinces herself that he must love her in his own way. A fight breaks out. Meursault's friendship with Raymond continues. One evening, Raymond gets into a violent altercation with his mistress. The neighbors hear the shouting, the hitting. The police arrive, and Raymond is taken in for questioning. Meursault, indifferent to the situation, agrees to testify in Raymond's favor. Despite the clear evidence of domestic violence, Raymond is let off with a warning. He thanks Meursault for his support and promises him a relaxing weekend at the beach house. Meursault, as always, simply goes along with it. He does not realize that his choices, his indifference, are leading him towards something he cannot escape. Chapter 4. A Weekend by the Sea. The weekend arrives, and Meursault joins Raymond and a mutual friend, Meursault, at the beach house. The sun is relentless, the heat unbearable, yet the setting is peaceful. They spend the morning swimming, eating, and lounging. Marie is with Meursault, and for a moment, everything feels simple and free. But trouble is near. Raymond has enemies, Arab men, one of whom is the brother of his mistress. They have followed him to the beach, watching, waiting. Tension builds. Before long, a confrontation occurs. Words are exchanged, fists fly, and Raymond is slashed with a knife. Though wounded, he refuses to back down. Later, as Meursault walks alone on the beach, the heat pressing down on him, he sees one of the Arabs resting near the water. His hand tightens around a gun. The moment that will change everything is about to unfold. Chapter 5. The Act of Murder. The sun blazes overhead as Meursault walks along the empty beach. The heat is suffocating, pressing down on him like a physical force. His head throbs, his body aches, and the glare of the sun reflecting off the sea is blinding. Then, he sees him, the Arab man, sitting near the water's edge. Meursault hesitates. The man is alone, lying back in the sand, his face shadowed. The knife wound Raymond inflicted earlier is still fresh. There is no immediate threat, no reason for violence. And yet, Meursault does not turn back. As he approaches, the Arab sits up and slowly reaches into his pocket. A flash of light cuts through the air as the sun catches the blade of his knife. It is the sun, more than the man himself, that overwhelms Meursault. Sweat drips down his forehead. The brightness is unbearable. His heart pounds. The burning sun, the scorching sand, the gleam of the knife, all fuse into one blinding sensation. Almost without thinking, Meursault pulls the trigger. A single gunshot rings out across the beach. The Arab collapses onto the sand. Silence. The moment stretches. The world holds its breath. The heat does not subside. The sun still burns. The sweat still drips. Meursault fires 4 more times. The bullets are unnecessary. The man is already dead. Yet, in this moment, it does not matter. Nothing matters. With each shot, Meursault feels something shift within him. Not guilt, not anger, not fear, but something inexplicable. A sense of finality. A meaningless act in a meaningless world. As he stands over the body, the weight of the moment sinks in. He has crossed an irreversible line. And yet, the sun still shines. The sea still moves. Life continues, indifferent. The consequences of this moment will define everything that comes next. Meursault does not yet realize it, but his fate has been sealed. Chapter 6. The Arrest and Interrogation. Meursault is arrested the following day. The authorities do not hesitate. A man has been murdered, and there must be justice. But it is not just the killing that condemns him. It is his indifference. At the police station, he is questioned relentlessly. The officers expect remorse, guilt, or even an attempt at justification. Meursault offers none. When asked why he killed the man, his response is simple: because of the sun. The officers exchange uneasy glances. His words make no sense. They press him further, but he gives no deeper explanation, no excuse, no attempt to absolve himself. His lawyer, appointed by the state, urges him to express regret, to show emotion, to convince the court that he acted in self-defense. Meursault refuses. Instead, he observes the absurdity of it all. The legal system, the procedures, the way people assign meaning to actions that, to him, have none. As the days pass, he becomes an object of fascination. The newspapers portray him as a monster, not just for the crime itself, but for his complete lack of conventional emotion. He is no longer just a man on trial for murder. He is a man on trial for his very existence. The world demands meaning where he sees none. And so, the walls begin to close in around him. Chapter 7. The trial begins. Meursault's trial is not just about his crime. It is about his character. From the moment he enters the courtroom, it is clear that his fate has already been decided. The trial is filled with spectacle and performance. The judge, the jury, the prosecutor, and even his own lawyer seem less interested in the facts of the case, and more in what kind of man Meursault is. The prosecutor wastes no time painting Meursault as a cold, emotionless monster. He reminds the court that Meursault did not cry at his mother's funeral. He shows how he went to the beach the very next day, flirted with a woman, watched a comedy, and carried on as if nothing had happened. The murder itself almost seems secondary. The real crime, in their eyes, is his lack of feeling. Marie is called to testify. She tries to defend Meursault, but her words are twisted against him. The prosecutor paints their relationship as proof of his moral depravity. A man who could so easily move on from his mother's death must be heartless. Raymond, the man who dragged Meursault into this situation, also testifies. But rather than helping, his presence only reinforces the idea that Meursault is a man without a conscience, keeping company with criminals. A defense without passion. Meursault's lawyer tries to argue that the murder was a simple crime, not premeditated, not planned, just a tragic event under the harsh sun. But Meursault's own indifference undermines his case. When asked if he feels regret, he shrugs. He does not play the game, does not try to convince the jury of his humanity, because to him, it does not matter. The jury watches him, searching for emotion, searching for anything that might make him seem human in their eyes, but they find nothing. the sentence. After days of arguments, testimonies, and heated speeches, the verdict is reached. Meursault stands as the judge delivers his sentence: death by guillotine. The courtroom erupts. Some celebrate. Others watch in shock. But Meursault, he feels nothing. He has been condemned, not for his actions, but for his refusal to conform. Society has judged him not just as a murderer, but as a man who does not pretend that life has meaning. And now, his time is running out. Chapter 8. Awaiting Death. Meursault is taken to prison to await his execution. The days pass in a haze of routine, isolation, and reflection. He does not pray, does not plead for mercy, does not rage against his fate. Instead, he accepts it. At first, he struggles with the idea of death. He imagines ways he might escape, but quickly dismisses them. What difference would it make? The outcome is inevitable. Visits and the absurdity of hope. A chaplain comes to see him, urging him to repent, to find faith before his death. But Meursault refuses. To him, religion is just another illusion, another attempt to create meaning where there is none. The chaplain insists, pleading with him to seek forgiveness, to acknowledge God. But Meursault, for the first time, loses his temper. He shouts that nothing matters, that life is meaningless, that no one has the right to judge him. The chaplain leaves, shaken. Meursault, however, feels strangely free. The final night. As his execution approaches, Meursault lies awake, listening to the sounds of the city beyond his cell. He thinks of the vast indifference of the universe, the sun, the sky, the waves on the beach. And finally, he understands. Acceptance of the absurd. Life has no greater meaning. There is no ultimate justice, no cosmic purpose. And that is okay. For the first time, Meursault is at peace. He feels the warmth of the world around him, embraces the chaos, the uncertainty. He is free. As the guards come for him, he looks forward, unafraid, ready to meet the world with the same indifference it has shown him. He hopes for a crowd at his execution, so that he can face them all with a heart open to the absurd. Final thoughts. The Stranger is a novel about acceptance, not of fate, but of the absurdity of existence. Meursault does not seek meaning because there is none. And in this realization, he finds peace. Albert Camus presents a philosophy where meaning is not given. It is something we must choose, to resist, to rage, or to accept. Meursault accepts. And in the end, that is his freedom. Subscribe for more classic book summaries in just 40 minutes. Check out our other audiobooks and rediscover the most important stories ever written. The Mystery of the Milk. One of the first signs of trouble came when the animals noticed that the milk from the cows had disappeared. At first, they had assumed it would be shared equally, just like everything else. But when they asked, the pigs simply replied, "It is needed for the leadership." Likewise, when the apple harvest came, the pigs took all the apples for themselves, claiming that they needed extra nutrition because they were in charge of making the big decisions. Surely you don't want Jones to come back. Squealer, Napoleon's slick-talking assistant, reminded them, "We pigs work for your benefit. Our brains keep the farm running." The animals, though uneasy, did not argue. They had fought too hard for their freedom to risk losing it again. Divisions begin to form. As time went on, Snowball and Napoleon began to argue more and more. Snowball wanted to build a windmill to generate electricity for the farm, making life easier for everyone. Napoleon, however, dismissed the idea. "Hard work, not fantasies, will keep us strong," he declared. Snowball, with his intelligence and enthusiasm, quickly won over many of the animals. He gave passionate speeches, drew up blueprints, and explained how the windmill could transform their lives. But Napoleon was not interested in debate. He was interested in control. Then came the meeting that changed everything. As Snowball stood before the animals, explaining his final plans for the windmill, Napoleon stood up and let out a strange, sharp whistle. From the shadows, 9 enormous dogs charged into the crowd. They ran straight for Snowball, snarling and snapping. Snowball had only a moment to react before he was forced to flee for his life, running as fast as he could across the fields. He disappeared beyond the farm's borders, never to be seen again. The animals stood in shock. Where had the dogs come from? They realized that these were the puppies Napoleon had secretly raised in private, training them to be his personal enforcers. Snowball was gone, and Napoleon was now the undisputed ruler of Animal Farm. A new leader. A new era. Napoleon, now standing where Snowball had once been, looked at the gathered animals and declared, "The windmill was Snowball's foolish dream. It will not happen." From that day forward, meetings were abolished. Napoleon would make all decisions himself. The animals, though uneasy, had no choice but to accept his rule. Squealer, always ready with an explanation, assured them, "Comrades, Napoleon is only looking out for you. Do not worry. Everything he does is for the good of Animal Farm." But deep down, some of the animals could not help but feel that something had gone terribly wrong. The rebellion had started with dreams of equality. But now, one leader ruled them all, and it was only the beginning. Chapter 4. Spreading the Revolution. As weeks passed, Animal Farm settled into its new way of life. Napoleon's rule was firm, and the farm continued to function efficiently. But the dream of revolution did not end at the farm's borders. Napoleon and Squealer spread the idea of rebellion to other farms, encouraging animals elsewhere to rise up against their human masters. Pigeons were sent to neighboring farms to share the message of animalism, whispering of a new world where animals ruled themselves. Meanwhile, Mr. Jones, the former owner of Manor Farm, had not given up. Furious at being overthrown, he gathered a group of men from the nearby farms of Foxwood and Pinchfield to take back what he had lost. Then, one crisp autumn morning, Jones and his men returned with guns. They marched toward Animal Farm, ready to reclaim it by force. The animals had no time to prepare. The men stormed the fields, shooting as they advanced. The animals, though terrified, fought back with everything they had. Led by Snowball's pre-planned battle strategies, they charged at the men, using their hooves, horns, and claws. The horses kicked, the geese pecked, the cows rammed. Even the sheep, usually meek, swarmed and confused the enemy. Snowball himself led the charge, launching at Mr. Jones and knocking the gun from his hands. Jones fired a shot, wounding Snowball, but he refused to back down. After a brutal fight, the men were forced to flee. The animals had won. A hero is born, but quickly forgotten. The battle was later named the Battle of the Cowshed, and the animals celebrated their victory. Snowball was hailed as a hero, wounded but proud. He had led them to triumph. But Napoleon saw things differently. He watched as the animals cheered for Snowball, and he did not like it. The animals declared that a medal should be awarded to Snowball for his bravery. But Napoleon remained silent. He had already decided that Snowball's days were numbered. And soon enough, history would be rewritten in a way that would erase Snowball's victory entirely. Napoleon was patient. He knew that power was not just taken with force. It was controlled through fear, through manipulation, through changing the past to suit the present. And little by little, he was preparing for his next move. Chapter 5. The Rise of Napoleon. The winds of change swept across Animal Farm. Snowball was gone, driven out by Napoleon's ruthless dogs, and with his departure, any sense of debate or democracy vanished. Napoleon was now the supreme leader of the farm, and his rule was absolute. The windmill returns. Ironically, just days after declaring Snowball's plans for a windmill foolish, Napoleon announced that they would, in fact, build it. The windmill, he claimed, had always been his idea. Squealer, ever the loyal propagandist, reassured the animals. Comrades, Napoleon was merely pretending to oppose the windmill to get rid of the dangerous traitor Snowball. Now that Snowball is gone, we can build it the right way. Some of the animals, particularly Boxer the horse, accepted this explanation without question. Napoleon is always right, he repeated to himself. Others, though confused, were too afraid to argue. A new kind of rule. With his position secure, Napoleon made a series of changes. The Sunday meetings were abolished. No longer would animals gather to discuss farm policies. Instead, Napoleon would make all decisions, and they would be announced by Squealer. Even more unsettling, the animals noticed that Napoleon was rarely seen in public. He remained in the farmhouse, surrounded by his guards, the fierce dogs who had chased Snowball away. Napoleon also began using fear as a weapon. Every so often, Squealer would remind the animals, "Do you remember how hard life was under Jones? Surely you do not want him to return." The animals, though exhausted and overworked, convinced themselves that they were still better off than before. The rewriting of history. As time passed, strange things began to happen. The animals remembered that Snowball had fought bravely at the Battle of the Cowshed, that he had been injured protecting the farm. But now Squealer told them a different story. Snowball was a traitor, he declared. He was working with Jones from the beginning. Some animals hesitated. This was not how they remembered it. But as the weeks went by, Napoleon's version of history became the only accepted truth. The past was being rewritten before their eyes. Those who questioned it too much disappeared. Boxer's blind loyalty. Through it all, Boxer, the strongest and most hard-working of all the animals, remained utterly loyal to Napoleon. His personal motto, "I will work harder," became a kind of slogan for the farm. Whenever things got worse, whenever food rations were cut or rules changed, Boxer simply worked harder. Napoleon saw this and used it to his advantage. Napoleon's growing power. Life on the farm became harder, but Napoleon grew stronger. He was now never questioned. The animals were cold, hungry, and exhausted, but Squealer assured them that things were improving. Do not trust your memory, comrades. Trust the numbers. We have increased production more than ever before. And when the animals looked at the figures he presented, they had no choice but to believe him. Napoleon had taken control of everything: the farm, the food, the truth. And for the first time, the animals realized that their dream of equality had turned into something else entirely: a dictatorship. But by the time they realized it, it was too late. Chapter 6. The Burdens of Leadership. The animals worked harder than ever before. Napoleon's rule was strict, and his demands were endless. The construction of the windmill had begun, and the labor was backbreaking. No machines, no tools, just muscle and determination. Boxer, as always, took the lead. "I will work harder," he repeated tirelessly, dragging massive stones day after day. His strength inspired the others, even as their bodies ached and their stomachs rumbled from constant hunger. Yet, despite their efforts, life did not improve. Food rations were cut. Winter was brutal, and the farm was starving. The animals could not understand. Weren't they supposed to be better off than before? Napoleon's lies and justifications. Squealer, always ready with an explanation, assured them, "Comrades, we must make sacrifices. Our great leader Napoleon is making sure we survive. Do not listen to lies. Do not let doubt creep into your minds." The animals wanted to believe. But deep down, some of them felt something was wrong. Then came the most shocking news yet. Napoleon had decided to trade with humans, trading with the enemy. At the start of the revolution, it had been declared that animals would never engage in trade with humans. But now, Squealer explained, times had changed. Napoleon had struck a deal with the neighboring farms. They would sell eggs and grain in exchange for supplies. The hens, outraged at having their eggs taken, rebelled. They refused to give up their eggs, smashing them instead. Napoleon's response was swift and brutal. The dogs were sent in, and several hens were executed in front of the others. Fear spread. No one dared question Napoleon again. The collapse of the windmill. Despite the suffering, the windmill's construction continued. It became a symbol of progress, of animal farm strength. But then, on a stormy night, disaster struck. The windmill collapsed. The animals stood in shock, staring at the rubble. All their work, all their pain, gone. Napoleon, however, did not accept failure. "Snowball did this," he declared. "The traitor has returned to destroy what we built." The animals were horrified. Their hatred of Snowball, fueled by months of Squealer's lies, boiled over. Napoleon used this anger to tighten his grip further. The Purge. In the days that followed, Napoleon carried out his most terrifying act yet. One by one, animals were dragged before Napoleon's feet. Confessions were forced. Animals who were suspected of working with Snowball were executed on the spot. The killings continued until the ground was stained red with blood. Fear gripped the farm like never before. No one felt safe. The dream of freedom had turned into a nightmare of terror. And yet, despite it all, the animals kept working. They rebuilt the windmill. They accepted the hunger. They accepted the executions. Because in the back of their minds, they still believed. Somewhere, deep inside, they clung to the hope that this was all necessary, that Napoleon was their protector, that they were still working for something greater, even as the truth slipped further and further away. Chapter 7. The Harshest Winter. As the bitter cold of winter set in, Animal Farm fell into despair. The animals had never been so hungry, so exhausted, so afraid. The promised prosperity of their revolution had vanished, replaced by endless toil and silent suffering. The food supply was dwindling, and Napoleon knew that if the outside world discovered how badly things were going, it could threaten his control. He ordered Squealer to spread false reports to neighboring farms, boasting that Animal Farm was thriving. The starvation and lies. In reality, the animals were starving. Their rations were cut again and again, and they were forced to eat whatever they could find: roots, straw, even sawdust mixed into their feed. To maintain his image of success, Napoleon tricked the outside world. He had the empty grain bins filled with sand, with a thin layer of real grain on top. When human visitors came, they saw the full storage and left believing the farm was prospering. The rebellion of the hens. But not everyone accepted Napoleon's rule without question. The hens were pushed to their limit when Napoleon announced that they must surrender even more eggs to trade for food. The hens, knowing this would mean starvation for their young, refused. In an act of defiance, they smashed their own eggs rather than hand them over. Napoleon responded swiftly and without mercy. The dogs were sent in, and the rebellious hens were brutally executed. The farm fell into an even deeper state of fear. No one spoke of rebellion again. Napoleon tightens his grip. As the months passed, Napoleon's control grew absolute. He stopped appearing in public, instead issuing orders through Squealer and the dogs. His every decision was law, and the animals no longer dared question his authority. He increased his personal comforts, moving into the farmhouse permanently, sleeping in a bed, drinking alcohol. All things that had once been forbidden. But Squealer always had an explanation. Our great leader Napoleon deserves the finest accommodations. He carries the burden of leadership for all of us. The animals, weak and overworked, simply nodded. They had no strength left to resist. Snowball, the eternal enemy. Even though Snowball was long gone, Napoleon used his name to maintain control. Any failure, any problem, any disaster was blamed on the invisible traitor. The storm destroyed the windmill. Snowball did it. The rations were low. Snowball sabotaged the food supply. An animal was caught speaking against Napoleon, clearly a spy for Snowball. The animals lived in fear of an enemy who no longer existed. The executions continue. One evening, Napoleon gathered the animals and staged another purge. One by one, animals were dragged forward. Each was accused of being a traitor, a spy, a follower of Snowball. Under pressure and threats, some confessed to crimes they never committed. Each confession ended the same way. The dogs tore them apart. By the end of the night, a pile of bodies lay in the farmyard. Blood soaked the ground where once they had gathered in hope and unity. The remaining animals watched in horror, but no one spoke. No one dared. The rebellion had come full circle. The animals had overthrown one tyrant, only to create another. But now, they were too broken to resist. The fading of beasts of England. As the terror spread, something strange happened. The animals stopped singing Beasts of England. Once their anthem of freedom, it now reminded them of everything they had lost. Napoleon noticed this and officially banned the song. He replaced it with a new anthem, one that praised him personally. It was clear now. The revolution was dead, and Napoleon was the new Jones. Chapter 8. The Tyrant's Empire. By spring, Napoleon had transformed Animal Farm into his personal empire. He was no longer just a leader. He was a ruler. His image was everywhere, painted on the barn walls, glorified in songs, spoken about in hushed reverence. Squealer now referred to him as our leader, Comrade Napoleon. His name was always followed by elaborate praises. Napoleon, the wise, the just, the father of all animals. More lies, more fear. Napoleon's control over information became complete. The animals were told things had never been better. Squealer read out fake statistics about increased food production. He reminded the animals of their glorious victory against the traitor Snowball. The farm was stronger than ever, he claimed, and all was thanks to Napoleon's genius. Yet, the animals knew the truth. They were hungrier than ever, more afraid than ever. The secret deals with humans. Despite their original hatred for humans, Napoleon began negotiating with them. First, he sold timber to Mr. Frederick, a neighboring farmer. But soon after, Frederick betrayed them, paying with counterfeit money. Napoleon, furious, declared war. The Battle of the Windmill. Mr. Frederick and his men stormed Animal Farm, armed with guns and explosives. Their target? The windmill. The animals fought back bravely, but the men blew up the windmill, reducing it to rubble. The animals had won the battle, but at a terrible cost. Their symbol of progress was destroyed. More executions, more betrayal. Napoleon used the attack as an excuse for more executions. Traitors among us, Squealer declared. More animals were dragged forward, accused of plotting against Napoleon. The dogs tore into them without hesitation. The farm of hypocrisy. The commandments were quietly altered to fit Napoleon's actions. No animal shall drink alcohol became, no animal shall drink alcohol to excess. No animal shall kill another animal, now read, No animal shall kill another animal without cause. The animals could not remember when these changes had happened, but Squealer assured them the commandments had always been this way. The final illusion. Napoleon continued to host meetings with humans, walking on two legs, drinking with them, and treating them as equals. One day, the animals peered through the farmhouse window and saw Napoleon dining with the human farmers. They watched in horror. There was no longer a difference between the pigs and the humans. Their revolution was gone. Their dream of equality had been crushed. And they finally understood. Animal Farm had become exactly what they had fought to destroy. Chapter 9. The Betrayal of the Loyal. The hardships on Animal Farm grew worse with each passing season. The animals were older, weaker, and hungrier, but Napoleon's grip on power only strengthened. His commands were absolute, his rule unquestioned, and his propaganda machine, led by Squealer, worked tirelessly to maintain the illusion of success. Boxer's last stand. No one worked harder than Boxer, the loyal cart horse. Even as his body grew frail and his legs trembled from exhaustion, he repeated his personal mantra: "I will work harder." The animals admired Boxer's strength and dedication, but they also worried about him. He was their strongest worker, but age had begun to slow him down. He dreamed of retiring someday, resting in the pasture he had been promised when he could no longer work. But Napoleon had other plans. One day, Boxer collapsed from overwork while hauling heavy stones for the windmill. The animals rushed to his side, desperate to help, but there was little they could do. Napoleon announced that Boxer would be taken to a veterinary hospital in town to receive proper care. The animals were relieved. Napoleon was finally showing compassion. Then came the day of Boxer's departure. A strange-looking cart arrived, and as the animals gathered to bid him farewell, Benjamin, the old donkey, read the words on the side of the cart. It did not say, "Veterinary Hospital." It said, "Horse Slaughterer." The animals screamed in horror as they realized the truth. Boxer was not being taken for treatment. He was being sent to his death. The strongest, most loyal worker of Animal Farm was being sold for profit. Boxer, too weak to fight back, could only look out at his comrades as the cart drove away. His final words, whispered with his last breath, were, "Napoleon is always right." The aftermath of the betrayal. The animals mourned Boxer, their grief heavy. But before they could question Napoleon's cruelty, Squealer arrived with another lie. "Comrades, do not be sad," he said. "Our great leader Napoleon did everything he could for Boxer. He received the best medical treatment, but alas, he was too weak. Napoleon was by his side at the end, whispering words of comfort." Then a shipment of whiskey arrived. Napoleon and the pigs drank late into the night, celebrating Boxer's glorious life. The animals, too afraid to question anything, forced themselves to believe the lie. The final transformation. As the months passed, Animal Farm's transformation was complete. The pigs walked on two legs. The commandments had all been erased, replaced with a single phrase: "All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others." Napoleon dressed in human clothes, smoked a pipe, and held feasts with the neighboring farmers. Animal Farm was no longer a farm run by animals for animals. It was a dictatorship, ruled by pigs, enforced by dogs, and justified with lies. And the dream of a better future was gone forever. Chapter 10. The Final Betrayal. Years passed. Many of the animals who had fought in the rebellion were gone. The younger generation, born after the revolution, knew no other life but Napoleon's rule. They accepted it without question. The farm was wealthier now, but the animals saw none of that wealth. The pigs lived in luxury while the rest worked harder than ever, barely surviving on meager rations. The once proud ideals of animalism had become nothing but a distant memory. The pigs become the humans. One evening, the animals gathered outside the farmhouse. Curious, they peered through the window and saw something shocking. Inside, Napoleon and the pigs were drinking and laughing with the human farmers. They played cards, toasted glasses of whiskey, and joked as if they were old friends. The animals were horrified. Hadn't they fought to rid themselves of humans? Hadn't the rebellion been about breaking free from their oppression? And then, the animals noticed something even more disturbing: the final scene. As they watched, they saw that the pigs had changed. They no longer looked like pigs at all. Their faces had become human-like, their movements identical to the men they once called enemies. And as Napoleon and the human farmers laughed and clinked their glasses together, the animals outside could no longer tell who was who. The pigs had become the very oppressors they had once overthrown. The revolution was not only dead, it had never truly existed at all. Final thoughts. Animal Farm is a warning about how power corrupts absolutely, and how revolutions, no matter how noble, can be twisted into something far worse than what they sought to replace. What began as a fight for freedom ended in a system even more oppressive than before. Napoleon did not free the animals. He enslaved them in a new way, with fear, manipulation, and lies. George Orwell's message is clear. Beware of those who claim to fight for justice but seek power instead. Beware of leaders who rewrite history. Beware of revolutions that replace one master with another. And most of all, beware of forgetting the past. Because when that happens, history has a way of repeating itself. Subscribe for more classic book summaries in just 40 minutes. Check out our other audiobooks and rediscover the most important stories ever written.